All right, good morning. My name is Melissa Ryan. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am coming to you this morning to talk about relationships. And as we all know, just given what's been going on in the world, many folks are under a lot of just personal stress. And then with that, we often bring that stress to our relationships, and it just kind of turns into, I don't know a better way to say this, a clusterfuck of stress and overwhelm. And you can feel helpless one minute and afraid the next minute of what's going to happen in terms of the security of things. And so you're emotionally all over the place, and your partner or whoever you're romantically involved with might be all over the place. And just relationships in general, in terms of, when you're talking with family members, friends, you'll sense they're all over the place. And so this was intended, actually, when talking with Chriseda, was here on the call with us, that this was intended, here, I'll do a gallery view. They saw you, Chriseda. There you are. Chriseda's going to be co-facilitating. So yeah, when we're overwhelmed, it just adds to the chaos of things and can make communication really difficult. And we all hear the saying that with relationships, communication is so key. It's so fundamental to feeling like you're on the same page with somebody. And when you're stressed, it's very hard to communicate effectively, right? And so in talking with Chriseda and having a conversation about what could be helpful to Connects members and humans at large, we thought it could be helpful to talk about some tools that are simple that you could implement today that would help relieve some of your own personal stress and then some of your relationship stress. And yeah, that's kind of the intention. And so I'll go ahead and pull up my little beautiful PowerPoint. Hopefully it goes as seamless as we can make it go. And here we are. So here we are. We're talking about redefining your relationship. So the interesting thing about this time period, whenever there's a lot of change, when we can get through some of these difficult emotions, often we realize it's an opportunity to redefine or restructure things, because the former structure, it no longer works. And so it gives us an opportunity to reflect on what would we want to build moving forward. I see that a lot of times in the couples work, in that something happens and the current model of the relationship doesn't work for the couple anymore. So a lot of our conversation is about, like, okay, well, since this model is not working, what would you want to create together that would work better and would help you feel more on the same page, and not only would help you survive what life has, the unfolding of life, but thrive in this chaos. Um, in reflecting on my own experience, I'm married and in a committed partnership, and in reflecting on my own experience with the pandemic, this time period for us, because of the tools we've acquired throughout our relationship, has been a time of growth, because we're extremely privileged in the ability to work from home, and there's a lot of things that are not on our plate, that are on other people's plates. So it is a little different in that sense. And we've created space and time and prioritized really getting on the same page with one another. So I wanted to offer some of what I've just seen work personally, and then also what I've seen work with couples. And so with, this is my game plan. I'm going to briefly go over the working agreement, talk about our relational environment. I've already kind of talked about that. I want to go over the cycle of harmony, rupture, disharmony, and repair. Because it's so valuable in terms of understanding the cycle of relationships and attunement, and it shows up in all relationships, so really huge. And then we're going to do an exercise on how to that will help reduce stress, hopefully, and it's a tool that you can use. I use it all the time. We're going to talk about the sense of we, and then, as advertised, a new model for thinking about and operating in relationships, because like I said, because there's been such a dismantling of current systems and there's a lot of chaos, it also offers opportunity to build a structure with intentionality of like, what kind of relationship model would we like to implement now that the current models aren't really working? So, do you have any questions so far, Chriseda?
I do not.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. We'll add anything in. As I said, it's weird when it's just me talking. So like if you have a comment,
I'll just leave
question,
me on unmute. I'll leave me on unmute.
Beautiful. So then it feels less awkward to me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so working agreement. So working agreements are important for any relationship. You know, one of the biggest things that I see for myself and for other couples is realizing that there were expectations that are not met. So how satisfied or unsatisfied we are in life, not just in our relationships, is related to how well life or relationships are meeting our expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And often we don't even know we have these expectations until we're disappointed. That's usually a clue that we had an expectation that went unmet. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I don't expect anything. I'm just going to show up. It's like, no, you expect something. Like, and you'll know it because if you feel pretty satisfied, then that just meant your expectations were met. But if you look back and you're like, oh, that wasn't as fun as I thought it would be, right there, that language, I thought it would be, that is your clue that you had an expectation going into it. Now, usually our expectations are subconscious. So it's really helpful if we can bring that into our awareness of like, you know, going into this presentation, this is what was communicated in the flyer. And so based on that, your mind started coming up because our mind is so good at creating stories. And it's very helpful in terms of our ability to predict choices we might make, or in terms of survival purposes, the reason our brain starts to analyze and predict and create expectations is to set us up so that we can, well, live. Right? Like, so, so on a basic premise, this idea of our brain creating expectations and preparing us is a survival mechanism. And if we can make ourselves aware of that, then we can determine whether or not our expectations are going to be realistic, if we want different expectations. It just gives us more choice and power in the situation, which is helpful, right? So, I am laying out in our working agreements what you can expect from this presentation and what you can expect in terms of how I'm going to behave and hold this space, right? So as I mentioned, I'm a counselor and this is not counseling. So I'm not offering clinical advice in any capacity. It's meant to be educational. If, you know, you realize throughout this presentation, oh, there's some issues that I really think a counselor would be helpful, please follow up with me and I will refer you out to some amazing couples counselors. And that's not the intention of the presentation. Number two, if a participant is going to share something about their experience, I ask that it's held in the confidentiality of the group. Since we're recording, I realize that that's a moot point. So it's really going to be me probably sharing. And if anyone shares, then we're not going to be able to hold confidentiality the same way we would in a space. So what I'm going to say about that is any story I share, I'm comfortable with you sharing with anyone. And know if you share, since this is recorded, your confidentiality is not going to be protected the same way.
Right.
Number two is take care of yourself. So if you have to go to the restroom, if you need snacks or water, or you need to turn off your screen because you've had too much Zoom time, all of that is encouraged. And in fact,
thank you for saying that.
You're welcome, Chriseda.
We get nervous and then we don't take in everything because we're like, oh my gosh, I have to go to the bathroom so bad, but I don't want to disrupt the continuity of this workshop. But then we're not taking it in because we're uncomfortable and wondering how much longer, you know, we can. So yeah, thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah. And it's one of my big things you'll see in this presentation is around self-care and how critical it is for how we show up for ourselves in our relationships. And so yeah, I'm going to promote that even on a basic level, right? So ideally, I will not have to go to the bathroom in the middle of this presentation. I guess if it happens, we'll get, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But for the rest of you, yes, please, you know, do what you need to do. And again, you can always turn off your screen if that feels more comfortable. Okay, so uncertain times. As I kind of already talked about, this has had a big impact on relationships because families, couples, individuals are faced with hurdles that are unique to this set of circumstances. Um, I myself, as Brene Brown talked about her, FFT, fucking first times. This is an
Oh
FFT
yeah,
for me.
that was amazing. Yeah,
So good.
FFT.
FFT, please check it out because this is, it is an FFT for all of us. I don't know anyone. I mean, although I did see that there was a woman who recovered from the Spanish flu and recovered from COVID, and she's over 100 years old.
Wow.
So that's pretty incredible. She is unique in the sense that she has indeed lived through a global pandemic. However, the rest, that's a few and far between, right? The rest of us, this is totally new. Teaching our, parents teaching their kids while they're trying to work from home, or they're in a frontline job, so they're worried about their own healthcare risk. I mean, most people that were working in some of these frontline jobs, their concern of getting a virus in this way wasn't on their mind, right? Like when people were working at convenience stores or fast food restaurants, they may have had other health concerns. Getting this virus that's part of a global pandemic was not part of it, right? So if you're in a family where, your loved one is on the front line, that adds a whole new stress element. Plus you got kids doing school at home, and the economy. And then we have a lot of social issues. A lot of our shadow of our culture is manifesting. And so a lot of these systems that don't serve people, that are causing suffering and oppression, that's all manifesting. And we're trying to wrestle with that. It's just a lot. And so it can lead us to, wanting to just, like, I don't know, shut ourselves in our bed and watch Netflix all day. And that's understandable. And sometimes you might have to do that. So I just want to speak to that because this all plays into relationships. Culture has a huge impact on how we show up in our relationships. And so these cultural influences and what's happening has a big impact. And then what's happening in your own relationship, in your own ecosystem, also has a big impact, right? So that brings me to something I was talking with you, Chriseda, about the cycle of attunement. So why I want to bring this up is because it is, once you understand this model, and this is about how we create trust and connection in relationships. Once you understand it and you can see it, you can navigate it, right? Once we have awareness around something, it's just so helpful because then we can see it and we're like, oh, so okay, true. Like, that's it. This is the thing, And so this research originally was done by Ed Tronick and some other researchers looking at how babies and caregivers formed attachment. That's where they're original. So if you want to look into Ed Tronick and attachment research, you can dive deeper into understanding. Stan Tatkin took these concepts and applied it to romantic relationships. So you can also dive into his work. It's really cool. It's about the brain and how to form lasting, satisfying relationships through your understanding of the brain. So shout out to those guys.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm excited to hear this.
Yeah, I've added my own things to this cycle because I've seen some things that I'm like, oh, this is how this cycle works, right? So the first element, we'll start over at harmony. So harmony is when you're in sync. So if you're talking about, since we're talking about romantic relationships, it's like when you and your partner are just like so happy and you're like stoked on the world and you're like accomplishing things and you don't even have to communicate. You're just like on the same page, This feels like so good. We often experience this a lot when we're dating. We can come back to that, but that's what harmony is, right? And then there's a rupture, and rupture sounds really harsh. It's just like you're no longer on the same page. It's a disruption, basically. And a rupture can be caused by something somebody said or didn't say, or didn't do or did do, or it can just be external. Like in the case of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes. COVID can cause a rupture in your flow. right?
Mhm.
Like I do a lot of mountain biking and skiing. And so I'm like in the flow, and now all of a sudden the trail's closed. That's a pretty
Yeah.
darn big rupture,
Mhm.
or there's like, there's been an avalanche, in the winter, and now there's like hundreds of trees in front of me on this trail. It's a pretty big
Mhm.
rupture. And I got to figure out how I'm going to navigate it. And it's disruptive, and it brings up all these feelings. When we have a rupture, um, often we don't want to acknowledge it. That's what I've noticed with couples. They're like, well, I don't want to
Oh, yeah.
name it. And it's like, but it's already happened. Like, naming it
Yeah.
doesn't like
Yeah.
make it happen. It's already happened.
Right.
And naming it is actually really helpful, because then for yourself, you can go, okay, we've had a rupture. How do we get back on the same page? What needs to happen? So that's why that's helpful, right? So we've had this rupture, COVID, and you see this like little cloud coming in, and it could be a little cloud or it could be a big
Mhm.
cloud. Terry Real talks about the dark night of marriage, or the dark night of relationship. It is when you've had this rupture, you're headed in, or you're in disharmony. And in this moment, you are thinking to yourself thoughts like, I knew I couldn't trust him or her. They always let
Ah.
me down. Um, I'm such a fool for believing I could trust people. I don't know why. It's all this like, we would talk like very dark negative thoughts.
Mhm.
And we can't see any light. It just feels, and our body just feels, it can feel
Yeah.
constricted, it can feel charged because maybe we're in a rage state. I mean, it could be all kinds of things that we in general don't feel good. It just feels yuck.
Yeah, it feels awful. Yeah.
So awful. And sometimes it's hard for us to recognize we're in it, because it's a very physiological experience. And so the more we can create our awareness again around this cycle, it's very helpful. Like when we start to recognize, like I can know I'm headed into this when I like look at my partner, who I normally am like, man, this person is my most favorite person in the whole world.
Mhm.
And when I do not have those thoughts, when I'm like, oh my gosh, they're the worst, then I know, then I know the cloud has come in,
Yeah.
and
But recognizing that and paying attention to that, those feelings that you have, is
mhm,
really key. It's key to recognize, oh, I feel like, poo about this thing going on. Why do I feel bad? I feel bad. Why do I feel bad? And all of that part is just hard sometimes to do, to
yes,
identify.
because we believe that if we sit with the emotions, we're going to make it worse. Like a lot of
Mhm.
people, I am one of those recovering avoidant feeling people.
Mhm.
I'll put that out there. And I definitely was like, if I just do like all these coping strategies, I can avoid the negative feelings. I'll just go on a mountain bike ride, or I'll go for a run. And none of those are bad in and of themselves. It's the intentionality, right? So
Mhm.
I can use those to help me process emotion if I bring that intention to that activity.
Yeah.
Or I can use those things to distract and avoid, which
Mhm.
is what I've done in the past and
Yeah.
sometimes still do. And so the longer I avoid and distract and don't deal with my feelings, the longer I'm in this cloud of darkness
Mhm.
and muck, and I'm in disharmony. And that brings me to my sunshine of self-care. So self-care, what I realized, actually got this from a client, because I was asking them, well, how do you go from disharmony to repair? Because in the original model, there is no little sunshine and there's no little cloud.
Sure.
So I was like, how do you go to this repair? And my client said, well, I have to take some deep breaths. I go for a walk. Sometimes I journal. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, so you engage in self-care? And they're like, yeah, I have to. Like, I have to
Yeah.
do this self-care so that I
Mhm.
can then talk to my partner. And I was like, oh yeah, that's like so obvious, but it's not a part of the model. So I added it,
Mhm.
right? Because the
Good.
self-care um, provides illumination, right? So, the whole mindfulness yoga trend that is happening, and now backed by science, is because it really works.
Yeah.
It's not because
Yeah.
it's like trendy, it's because it's very helpful. The
Mhm.
term Buddha means enlightened one. It's
Yes.
bringing light to the darkness, right? So the cloud came in, And when I access self-care with intentionality, right? So I'm intentionally going to work through the yuck, the emotions that I don't want to deal with, that I've been avoiding, and I'm going to like sit with them, and I'm going to say all emotions are welcome. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about treating each emotion like it's a little kid and like a little toddler. And you know, if you ignore toddlers, they get louder and louder and louder. Like if they want to show you a picture, I don't know if anyone's experienced this, and they're like trying to show you this picture, and you're like, no, I got to finish this thing. And they're like, I mean, they'll pull out all the stops to get your attention. And when you finally are like, okay, show me what you got to show me, and they show you your picture, that whole exchange doesn't usually last very long, and they run off to go do whatever it is that they want to go do. And it's the same with emotions. When we finally are like, okay, I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to pay attention, just show up, I'm here, and I'm going to be witness to you, and I'm going to care for you, and I welcome you. Then the emotion will pass. It does not stay. And we want to allow those to show up because they're great teachers in helping us understand what it is we need to bring to the repair process, what it is we need to say or not say. Is there something we need to hold our partner accountable to in a way that can be respectful of our needs and respectful of our partner? So those emotions are so key to helping us figure out what it is that we need to say when we go talk to our partner. It's very hard to access those words without this self-care process, because it's just not going to come. What's going to come is all the yuck. And then we're going to feel all this yuck and then throw it at our partner. And then weirdly, we won't repair. I know, it's strange. Partner's not stoked on that. So this is really key. And then usually with the repair process, we find ourselves getting more and more on track, and we cycle back into harmony. I want to say another thing about this cycle is so many people, like I was saying, will say, I'm not going to even acknowledge that there's a rupture, because then maybe, we have somebody joining us. Good morning. Please, at any point, good morning. Yeah, at any point, if you have any questions, let me know. So the thing I wanted to say about go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just caught up in work stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for joining.
It sounds like there's a big lag.
My name's Gordon Hunter. I'm Chriseda's boyfriend.
Oh, nice to meet you.
It's saying my connection is unreliable, so.
Okay, well, maybe if you do have a question, put it in the chat and I can read it.
Okay, I'm going to shut off my video. I think that's part of what's going on.
Okay.
And then I'm just going to listen in as much as I can around things going on around the house.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. So yeah, what I was saying about not wanting to acknowledge the rupture. What's so fascinating about this process is what Tronick's research demonstrated is that trust is built on this cycle, on how we deal with the rupture through repair. So it's not built in the times of harmony. It's built in, we have a rupture, we experience something upsetting, or a pandemic happens, and it's how we navigate and come together through the process of rupture, disharmony to repair that really builds that connection, that sense of we.
That's so true. And that's even true in a work environment. That's very true in a work environment, I think.
Because, right, you come to, like, you face adversity together and you're like, oh, we really have each other's backs.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
And so while the feeling avoidant, right here, would rather just be like, let's just skip to harmony. Why go through all this bullshit with the dark night and let's not. It turns out I'm wrong, and that's where the the relationship really happens. That's where the connection really happens. And so I can understand wanting to avoid it. I've been there. I've done that. And it turns out not helpful, because what will happen is over time, you'll have less and less harmony, and it really just creates distance. So if you and your partner, which is the case in my relationship, are avoidant naturally, because we come from conflict avoidant families, there is this natural process of just creating distance. So then what ends up happening is couples will say, I don't even really feel like I know my partner, or they know me. And it's a huge piece of that is every time there was a rupture, instead of coming together, they kind of handled it on their own. And so they kind of processed it like, okay, the pandemic is happening. I'm sure this is happening for couples right now. The pandemic is happening, and we're each kind of processing our own feelings and kind of managing on our own. And we only talk about logistics. Like, I've definitely heard couples say that. And that's unfortunate. It makes sense, because they're thinking like, I don't have capacity to sit down and talk about all this shit. Like, we just gotta survive. The problem with that is when you don't come together during the struggle, once you're through the struggle, you will not feel more connected with your partner. You will feel less connected. It is when you're dealing with the struggle that you get that sense of like, oh, we're a team and we can overcome this. And like, shit was hitting the fan, and we still were able to come together. And even if you like can't even talk about the repair, even if you're like, let's just both engage in self-care practices so that we can feel better, so we can show up for our kids. That is still connection, right? That's still part of this cycle. So with that, we're going to start with the self-care, because, you know, you're going to have rupture and disharmony. So naming that really helpful. And before you can even show up into the couple skills, the skills you work on with your partner, we got to do the self-care piece. So one of the ways I think about self-care and my own energy is a life bar in a video game, right? So you have your life bar when you're playing video games, and throughout the game, your life bar can go down, and then you can acquire things. Each game's different, but you can acquire things where the life bar increases, right? Well, we don't often notice that throughout the day our life bar is going down. We're just so caught up in like, I got to get this done, I got to get this done, and da 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 da. And so usually by the time we're seeing our partner at the end of the day, we're like in the flashing red zone, which in a video game, you know, means you're about to die. In the case of a relationship, it likely means a fight. Not that great, right? And so it's so huge. This is why like self-care, not a luxury, it's a necessity, because in order for our relationships to be successful, we have to take care of ourselves so that when we show up to see our partner, we're not in the flashing red zone, right? Like we're in a place to like hear what's going on for them or do a fun activity. It's really hard to access any of those things. Oh, somebody else is here. Thank you for joining. Hi, Jan. So life bar, manage that. And what do I mean by self-care? I was talking about this earlier. Coping versus numbing. So self-care, from my point of view, helps you process what was happening through the day, or release it, or it moves the emotional energy and the cognitive tiredness. It moves it. Numbing is you're just like kind of tuning out. It's a distraction. And when you come back from the numbing activity, you're still basically in the same spot. And so what I was sharing about having these positive coping skills, but not using them as such, that would be an example of numbing, right? So I might be going mountain biking to like numb out, but I didn't really allow myself to release or process anything. Then it's really not that helpful. So any questions so far?
No, but I would like to comment that, you're talking about being in that flashing red zone when you're at the end of the day and so much has happened and you come home to your partner and you barely have anything left. And a lot of times what happens is we look to our partner to recharge us, and they could be in the same position of having no energy to put forth toward anything, let alone giving it, you know, to us or to our, you know, to their partner. And that just, I think leads to further depletion for both, which you're already depleted. So where are you going to go from there?
Such a good comment, Chriseda. Yes, we often look to our kids, our partners, other people in our life, and especially right now, so many people are depleted. So it's really the self-care piece is just like I was saying, it's not a luxury. It's like critical for us to be able to show up in ways that feel good to us, right? That aren't depleting for us. And if we want to be of benefit to others, right? Like we want to, when we have abundant energy and good vibes, we can share that. And it's contagious. You know, they say the strongest nervous system in the room wins. And that's a fun little like neuroscience-y concept.
I like it.
Of, right? Like my nervous system can either produce good vibes or bad vibes, right? Like you could either feel energized by my presence or de-energized by my presence. And when we know we have that influence, we can bring that to our family. We can bring that to our relationships, right? If we are in the state of like, okay, I've like really recharged myself. I'm way out of not only am I out of the red flashing zone, I have like abundance to share. I can bring that to my relationships, and that will help raise up their vibe as well. So strongest nervous system in the room wins. So this is why practicing mindfulness and meditation and anything that can help you like get to that like very, you know, calm zone is so helpful, because you can bring that. It's good for you and it's good for those in your life. Which brings me to our activity. We're going to do a guided imagery exercise. So you can participate or not. Feel free to leave your screen on or turn it off. Yeah, this is what feels comfortable to you. You can close your eyes if that feels comfortable. If that doesn't, you know, just let your eyes go soft and focus on something in your space. I will not be looking at you, and I will more than likely close my eyes, because it's very hard for me to do these exercises and have my eyes wide open. I've tried. It doesn't work so well. So yeah, so just get to a comfortable space. If you want to lay down in your space and turn off your screen, you can. You know, you can put both feet on the ground and really feel the earth beneath you, whatever feels comfortable for you. And as I said, you can let your eyes go soft or close them all together. And we're just going to tune into our breathing. So just noticing our inhale and our exhale. And we're not going to control the breath. We're just observing it coming and going. So I'm going to lead you in the gentle body scan. So starting at the crown of your head, the top of your head, just noticing any sensation, not judging it, just noticing it. And you might not notice any sensation at all, and that's totally fine as well. All is welcome. And then working your way from the crown of your head down the front of your face to your forehead, brows, and jaw. We often store tension in this area, so just pay attention if there's any sensation in those areas. Noticing the back of your head. Base of your neck, all the way down to the base of your spinal cord, and just noticing sensation in those areas. And again, when your mind wanders, which it will do, just gently bring it back to the breath. You don't need to think about what you were doing before this presentation or after, but just bringing it into this present moment in the body. And then just noticing your throat and your chest, noticing your heartbeat, noticing your stomach, your hips and your glutes, any sensation if it moves or is still. Working your way down your legs, noticing the backs of your knees, the fronts of your knees, down to your ankles, tops of your feet, bottoms of your feet, your toes. Noticing your shoulders and your arms and your fingers. You can wiggle them if that feels good. And then just holding your whole body in awareness, noticing sensation coming and going. Noticing if things just feel neutral, if there's temperature shifts. And then in your mind's eye, I invite you to think of a place. It can be real or imagined. And it's a place where you feel total relaxation. And in this place, you can be sitting, you can be doing an activity you love. Just really take yourself to this place, noticing the colors, textures. What is the temperature of this place? What are the sounds? Is there a taste in the air? And then really breathing in all the smells of this space and allow that breath to fill your body. And then just checking in and noticing how the body responds to being in this place. And again, when your mind wanders, gently bring it back to being in this place and feeling what it feels like to be alive. And then taking a few more deep breaths, allowing yourself to really enjoy where you're at and what you're doing in your mind. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Nice.
So I tend to think of the same place, and I couldn't find the exact image of the place I was thinking of, but this image of me mountain biking is good enough. It's a piece of trail that's in Crested Butte. It's called Jedi Mind Tricks. It's part of Dr. Park Trail.
Nice.
Full name, right, Chriseda?
Mm-hmm. Love it.
And it is amazing. It's like smooth and you can go as fast and you're in this huge aspen forest. And I visualize this. And what's so cool about this exercise is the more you use it, you build those neural pathways. So it becomes more and more effective on how calm it makes you. So I usually suggest thinking of the same place, or at least 2 or 3 of the same places. I also find for myself, meditation, I'm not as effective when I sit. I'm more of a movement-based meditator. So like a walking meditation, or like I said, like imagining myself mountain biking, that helps me get to the calm space easier than if I tried to just like imagine myself sitting still by a lake. And either works, right? It's just finding what works for you. So I listed, there are plenty of apps to lead you in guided, visualization exercises. There's stuff on YouTube. You can attend yoga classes, all of this. Like there's just so much research about how valuable it is because, as I was saying, you're building these neural pathways around relaxation and rest and relief, and you're going to be able to increase your capacity to hold stressful situations, to be able to respond to stressful situations. It helps you be more resilient. So again, it goes back to self-care is not a luxury, it's a necessity, especially with what's going on right now in the world. We need as much resiliency as possible to handle the things that continue to unfold, right? Like life continues to bring us surprises. And so, and it will. I mean, that's just part of living. So these exercises are so key for ourselves So that was the self-care part that brings us into the repair part, right? So really accessing that self-care is so key so that we can repair with our partner. And as I was saying, a rupture can take place and it could be not related to you guys at all, right? It could just be like one of your kids is struggling in school, and that is disrupting the flow of the family. It's disrupting the flow of the partnership, and no one's to blame. We're not like, you know, there's no need to, even though as humans we often want to blame so that we can feel there's a sense of control. A lot of times there's no one to blame. And so then how do we come together? So we've done our self-care and we want to move into the sense of we. And as I said before, what I've seen in lots of the couples I've worked with is they'll say, yeah, we were like totally in harmony, and then all these life events happened, and then like we're not on the same page, and we're really stressed out, and we don't know what happened. Like, how did that happen? And a big part of it is they had ruptures, and you know, they struggled to even acknowledge there were ruptures. Then they found themselves in a state of disharmony, and they didn't have the tools or the skills to somebody had to check out and respond for work purposes. That's why I got distracted. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so yeah, what they don't realize is that when we come together in the struggle, that's how we create the we, as I was saying. And so the repair is so key. And so many couples are like, well, we just were hoping that we would, you know, time would heal all wounds. And it kind of does sometimes, but sometimes it does not, you know? So you'll have a rupture, there'll be a period of disharmony. And a lot of couples were like, well, we're just going to wait it out and hope it goes away. And I've tried this, as I mentioned.
Yeah, so have I. It doesn't really work. I mean, purely anecdotal, but it doesn't work for me.
It doesn't work for me. And I've not seen it work for a
single
doesn't
couple.
Work for
Sam. Doesn't work for Sam.
No. I have, yeah, do you want to add something to that, Sam, or just doesn't work?
Doesn't work.
And I have yet to see it work. Like, not one couple has given me an example where this works. So not a thing. So this is why we bring our intentionality, right? And it's the same if we bring it to work relationships. It's the same if there is a disruption or there's a conflict. The wait and see method does not work, right? We know this. We know we got to come together, have the difficult conversation so we can move through it. And it's the same in a romantic partnership. So I put down location, location, location. Where you have this conversation, very important. Seems obvious maybe, but don't have it at IKEA or Costco. Terrible places, right? There's too much going on. Don't have it in the car. I'm guilty of this. I'll be like, oh, it's quiet. We're together. great time to talk about serious issues. No, not so. Okay, because you can't look at your partner, and as I have look at each other during the conversation, so key. So Stan Tatkin, who was the gentleman I mentioned that talks about neuroscience and attachment, he talks about how it's so key for us to be able to look, make eye contact, because it helps us regulate our nervous system, right? We're looking at our partner, we're reminding ourselves, yes, indeed, I like you, and I want to work this out. Right. And so the repair, often also what I tell my clients, and I didn't add this, is be aware of your intention. Are you going to your partner because you actually want to work it out and get to harmony? Or are you looking for vindication, or like, you know, not even vindication, but like for them to be like, oh yeah, you are right. Because if you're still looking for them to turn around and say you're right, you probably need more self-care. That's not the point, right? Yeah. I mean, and it doesn't mean we let go of what our needs are, right? What I was saying about the self-care is, how can you language it in a way that you're assertive to your needs and say like, hey, you really let me down and this is what I need from you in the future. That's helpful, right? That's productive. We're saying, this is what happened and this is what I'll need from you in the future. And you're making a request and you're being specific. So I'm not saying we ditch that. It's just, if you're going to go to your partner and you've made a case during your self-care time, it is not time for repair. Repair is, I really actually want to get back into harmony with my partner. I know we can do this, and I'm going to enter into a conversation with them so that we can get to that place. So I thought that that's helpful to make that clear, because that's going to have a big impact. And to remind yourself, when you even start the conversation, I just did a video on with my family where we talked about our family counseling journey. And one of the things our family counselor had us do, and I often have couples do in my work with them, is to remind them of why they're there in the first place to do the work. So you can do that in your conversation with your partner. Like, we love each other, and the reason we're going to do this work is because we want to get back to that state of harmony. Like, I love you, partner, and I need to talk about these things so that we can continue to build on that love and connection. So location, 5 senses. So this is, again, bringing in what we know about the brain and our reptilian mind. A reptilian mind gets triggered by what's happening in the environment. So our partner's tone, our partner's eye contact, the temperature outside, all kinds of things. So in terms of success, being aware of what do you need to calm yourself down? Like, I did this with this presentation. I'm outside. Like, nature is so calming to me. I'm by a tree. I love trees. I'm drinking tea. Like, I'm standing up. I'm doing all these things to help me bring my best self forward. And you want to be able to do that in your relationship. Like, what are the things? Do you need a fuzzy blanket? Or do you need to be wearing your slippers? Or do you need to be sitting by a creek? Or like, what are the things that are going to help you? And then hopefully your partner's doing the same thing. And you guys are in a setting that's going to bring forth good conversation. So the picture I have right here is, over the course of COVID, my husband and I live really close to the Bear Creek Trail system. And almost every day during quarantine, we went and walked along the creek. And sometimes we talk about things that were serious and sometimes not. And we watch the animals, but that's like such a good location for both of us to have these conversations, because we both feel calm and relaxed and we're outside, and it's very enjoyable. Another tool I wanted to bring in, which is a Brené Brown tool, is the story I'm making up. Very helpful.
Yes, I love this. Yeah.
Right? Because it clarifies to your partner that it's not, it doesn't place blame, right? Like, so you did this. Well, sometimes it's our interpretation. Often it's our interpretation. So if the story I'm making up, like, so if your partner did or didn't do something, you can use the story I'm making up about what you did or didn't do is this. And you can check it out with your partner and see, like, is that accurate? Are you, on point or not? It's just like so helpful. And this is really good. I love it when folks that are more conflict avoidant or emotion avoidant, when they are the ones to initiate the repair process, it's so huge. It's so good for the relationship.
Yeah. And that's my daughter. Yeah.
Yes. Tell me more about that, Chriseda.
So I watched, because she hasn't read a lot of Brené Brown. Of course I have, but we watched her special, and she talks a lot about the story I'm making up. And I love that even though she's Brené Brown and has gone through all of this life stuff and she teaches all of this, she still makes up stories. And it helped me identify when I'm making up a story, because you get in your head and your heart and you're like, oh my God, this is the thing. And you're like, no, I recognize this is my story. I don't know if this is the actual thing that's happening. But my daughter will say, the story I'm making up is this. And I'm like, whoa, that is not where I am at all. So it really opens up communication. And she is conflict avoidant. And she's would rather bury her head and avoid than to say anything. But through that context, because she is a writer too, with that context in mind, she can say, this is the story I'm making up. So that was a huge tool.
It's so huge, and it's empowering. And for those of you who are conflict avoidant, your partner will feel so much gratitude if you initiate these conversations. You know, usually there's a partner that's, you know, I did another workshop on islands and waves, but there's usually a partner that's maybe more an internal processor. So they're like processing things internally, and they don't necessarily look to externally process, like talk it out. They're more inclined to like work through it on their own. And there is a component of that. And often internal processors are like, well, yeah, I figured it out, and then I just moved on. But they never brought any of what they figured out to the relationship.
Yeah.
And that's not that helpful. So
No,
and it's just like such a gift when you can bring those insights to the relationship. It's great for the relationship, and your partner will be so stoked when you, the more internal processing person, bring those insights and that feedback to them. So huge.
So if someone says, okay, here's the story I'm telling myself. I'm telling myself that I married an asshole. So I mean,
I've heard this, yes.
You're the only one that's ever said that.
So I think it still opens up, you know, communications. Not the greatest place maybe to start, but it still does open up communication.
A little passive aggressive, maybe.
If there's one thing I am not, Sam, that is passive aggressive. You know exactly where you are with me.
True. Yes. So usually, I mean, this goes back to why the self-care is so huge, because then you can connect with the story you're making up and figure out a way to try to present it in a way that your partner can hear you. Right? Because it goes back to, do you actually want the repair, or do you just want them to say you're right?
Yeah.
and you wrestle with that. Exactly.
Yeah.
You may be right, and now you have no relationship.
Yeah. Well, somebody would say, do you want to be right, or do you want to be married?
Yeah.
That's
it's so true. It's a choice. And what we forget, you know, I forget it. I remember in one of my couples and family classes, my professor saying, the greatest multicultural experience you will ever have is being in a committed relationship with somebody. It's very helpful, because sometimes I'll be like, well, why did you say it that way or think that way? And then I'll be like, oh, because you're a different person. But in the moment, I'm responding and thinking as if my partner is the same as me. And that's like, well, no. They're
that
different.
is so much of what is wrong with our country right now. That just sums up so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we forget, because, you know, there's that saying, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. And there's the trees blowing in
the lens.
Yeah, it's the lens, and we forget we have that lens. And so this process of slowing down, connecting with the story I'm making up, that's all about my lens. And we're coming to the repair process to understand one another's lens. That's the key. And to realize, like, oh, that's how you saw it, and that's how I saw it, and how can we work together to heal the hurt we may have unintentionally caused. A lot of times, no one's intentionally trying to cause harm. Most of the time, it's we're oblivious of what is really going on for our partner and what's going on for ourselves. And so we unintentionally cause harm. And that's why awareness is so key if we're trying to minimize, if you want to think, like you were saying, Samuel, like more big picture, if we want to reduce the negative impact we have on others, if we want to not unintentionally cause pain to others, awareness is huge, because then we're aware of where we stand, how we're feeling. Our emotions don't just get foisted on others. We take a responsibility and accountability for our own emotional health and well-being. And then we, not only are we not going to, we're less likely to cause harm. When we do cause harm, we're more likely to be aware of it and repair.
Yeah. Yep.
It's so huge. Self-care.
I think a lot of it is lack of awareness. So.
Yes. And a huge piece is, like, I use the metaphor, the Babadook, which I don't know if anyone's seen the Babadook. It's a really scary movie, and I hate scary movies. And my sister tricked me because she told me it was not scary. Lies. It's scary. It's a movie. It's an Australian film, I believe. And why I like this movie so much, because it's such a great metaphor for when we don't deal with our emotions, what can happen. And what you find out is this tragedy happens to this family. And it's a mom and a son are the main characters. And the tragedy is the mom and the dad get in a car accident when they're on their way to the hospital for the mom to give birth, and the dad dies. And so it starts out with a lot of grief and trauma and all this stuff. And the mom, you can tell, is just like totally disassociated. She's like disconnected from her emotions. She's disconnected from the kid. She's like shut down. She's numbed out. And the Babadook is this like monster. And what you come to find out is the monster is like growing as a result of this unresolved, unacknowledged pain. So it's getting stronger the more the mom is denying her own pain, her own feelings. And then at the end of the movie, there's a confrontation between the monster and the mom and the kid. And the mom finally like starts to feel, and like rage comes out and tremendous grief comes out, and you see the Babadook shrink. Like the Babadook's power is reduced. And the Babadook, it's interesting, at the end of the movie, the Babadook isn't dead, but they're taking care of the Babadook. They're like feeding it and stuff. And I like this metaphor because it's like, if you don't take care of your feelings, you're going to get a Babadook. And, you know, you could, again, bring it to systemic issues. When we do not take care and pay attention to bigger issues, we get huge Babadooks. And the Babadook is creating a lot of issues in our world. And only by acknowledging and dealing with the pain, you know, that's what I see so often is couples and individuals are avoiding the grief and the pain. And so they're just experiencing this Babadook wreaking havoc in their lives, and they can't understand why that is. And they're afraid. And yet when we lean into the pain, we will see that we are incredibly resilient and we will learn from it. That's a side note, but it's so huge to the repair process and what's happening at large. And then, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh,
Cameron?
go.
No. I love participation.
Oh, I was just going to say that I kind of view it like a volcano, right? Like it either builds up and then you have like, you know, the huge eruption, or you have like the one in Hawaii that just oozes all the time. My problem is I just need to figure out how to ooze all the time without burning everything.
Good point.
I need the gentle ooze.
Well, self-care,
like
Sam.
sauna.
It looks like you rode your bike into work today, so maybe that's some self-care.
Self-care, so huge. And that's actually, well, I'll bring it back. That's where I'm actually really wanting to support people, is how do we tap into this so we can show up for relationships? I'll bring that back. And then the last thing I added to the repair process is, as I said at the beginning, a lot of times we don't know we had expectations until we're disappointed. And so we'll be angry at our partner that they let us down and that they hurt us. And right there, they let us down. That is a clue that we had an expectation. And a lot of times we did not communicate that expectation. So the repair process offers opportunity to say, hey, like I really did have, you know, this is what I was expecting. So in the future, so key, because we can't fix the past. All we can do is learn from it, right? It's not about what you do. It's about what you do after what you did. So if we can give our partner an opportunity to do something different, give ourselves an opportunity to do something different, that instills hope. It doesn't feel hopeless. So huge.
Well, and like you said, we didn't always know that we had an expectation, but I think in a relationship, it's important to be able to say, you know what, I found myself disappointed and I didn't know that I was counting on this or that this was an expectation, but clearly it is. Let's talk about that. It's not your fault. You didn't know because I didn't even necessarily know. So I think keeping that open communications is terribly important, not only with our partner, but with ourselves, so we can recognize that and we don't feel bad about bringing it up and having that space to, I'm still discovering too. I'm discovering about you. I'm discovering about me. Yeah, that's so important.
And, you know, to hold ourselves in warm regard This is so key. This is why the self-care is so key, because we're investing in ourselves and we're saying, I'm important. How I feel is important. I'm going to hold myself in warm regard, because then when I go into the repair process and my partner says something, instead of getting defensive, I'll be like, oh, you know, I can hold this. I can hold what they have to say because I'm holding myself in warm regard. So I can hold myself in warm regard, and I can say maybe that behavior or that word wasn't great. And I can sit with my partner's pain, because it's very difficult to sit with my partner's pain if I can't even sit with my own pain. And I can't get to the place of I'm a person worthy of love and belonging. And so is my partner, and we're doing the best we can. And so I'm going to hold myself in warm regard, and I can hear my partner's pain, and I can hold my partner accountable. Like maybe I have told them this expectation and they really did let me down. And if I can come from a place of compassionate strength when I've done that self-care.
Yes.
So I brought up the cycle of what we covered so we can, you know, reground to what we were talking about. So I talked about harmony and that process of harmony, rupture, disharmony. We talked about self-care. We did the guided imagery exercise. You can do other things to bring yourself into a place of like, okay, I can hold myself in warm regard, and I'm feeling good, and I'm feeling grounded, and now I can go into repair. And it can be all kinds of things. It can be, I mean, the amount of self-care I utilize is tremendous, especially given what's going on in the world. I'm like beefing up the self-care, right? So it's like tremendous, you know? Go ahead, Sammy.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, it's a crazy world out there right now.
Yeah, so we need more self-care.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do? You said you bike?
I don't know. My thing used to be rock climbing, but I don't really do that much now. So honestly, I just started biking because I realized I need to do more exercise. So exercise and fitness was a big thing. And since I got married, and then, well, the marriage didn't really do much, but having a kid totally jacked that up. And then right before we had the kid, I tore my rotator cuff. So it's been like 2 years of not much exercise.
Yeah.
So that kind of drives me a little nuts. So biking to work does help a little bit.
Cool. Yeah. Finding those ways to have those outlets. And that's hard when folks get injured. I've noticed that too with, so one of the ways that I help with self-care, this is thinking about like, so they say there are 5 domains of the human health experience, of human well-being. I added a 5th or a 6th. So there's our physical health. Yeah, of course I added my own. You know, we have our physical health, so we can do self-care around that, eating well, sleeping, making sure we get exercise. We have our emotional health, which we can take care through journaling, doing physical activities with the intention of processing emotion. People meditate, they do yoga, you can draw. They rage, you know, you can create art. One of my clients is really into acrylic pours. So like, you know, whatever like really speaks to you, you know. Our cognitive health, reading books, talking to people about the books we read, taking breaks from doing cognitive work, because a lot of times we're really using a lot of our brain. So making sure that throughout our day, we take pauses and allow our brain to kind of reset. This is why napping can be so helpful, because it allows our cognitive and emotional parts of our health to like reset. We have, okay, I just did those. Okay, so then we have our sexual health, which counselors tend to avoid, but is a big part of who we are as beings. And so how do we take care of ourselves? And if you want to go all woo, you know, our second chakra is our sexual epicenter, but it's also where creativity and innovation and passion. And so when I'm talking about that, I'm not just talking about reproductive health. I'm also talking about like, how do you feel alive and creative and passionate
and potent in this world?
Yeah, exactly. And alive, you know? And so, you know, paying attention to that. We have our like social health. So how we're engaging with others. That's a component of emotional and cognitive health, but it's its own thing. Like, how are you feeling a sense of belonging and
Mhm.
connectedness. And then I added a sixth one because I think it's a different set of skills, and that's like relational, just being relational with yourself. Like, how do I relate to the different parts of me, the parts of me that are upset, the parts of me that are stoked,
Mhm.
like, how do I integrate? And then what are the relational skills I bring to the table in my social connections? It is its own skill set. And I really think it's important to tease out, you know, like being relational is looking at how do I honor myself and the relationship
Mhm.
and hold that in my conversation with my partner or with family or coworkers or whatnot.
Mhm.
That is
So,
really hard for people who are very task-based, because that is my problem. I am very task-based, and it does not work so well in relationships.
say more.
Say more.
What do
Yeah.
you
Say
mean?
more.
Well, like, do you ever do like the disc profile thing? I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a way high on the D&I side, and I'm very task-based. And it's like, oh, we've got this task to do. And if the relationship gets in the way, I'm focused on getting the task done, and we'll fix the relationship later, versus the, hey, let's all get along, and then we can accomplish the task. The getting along part just gets in the way sometimes.
Well, it's not efficient, right? And it's not
Yeah.
linear. Relationships, like, we have this nice little model, but as we all know, it's not. I
It is
mean, you
not
can go,
linear.
you might do some self-care and be like, get triggered again and move right back into disharmony.
Mhm.
You know,
Yep.
you might not, or you might start repair and then you or your partner says something and it's like, whoop, we're back in disharmony and we have to do more self-care. Or you might start the repair process and a kid runs in and is screaming or whatever because they need some help. There, all of a sudden now you have a rupture in the middle of your repair process, right? Like, none of this is, you know, we just go here and then we go here, and like, that's, as
Life
we
is
know,
messy. Yeah.
life is messy. And as you're hitting on it, Samuel, for task-oriented folks, this is the relationality piece is difficult because it's not task-oriented. It's much more circular. It's more messy.
Well, tasks you can check off too. That's the next thing. There's no checking this off. It's like, oh,
No.
I
Yeah,
fixed that
yep.
one. Okay, great. Now
Yeah.
there's like 10 more issues. And actually the issues really almost never get completely checked off. It always comes back around.
It's this constant process. This is process oriented versus I don't know, task oriented, right? Like, this is an ongoing process. These practices are constant. You know, if you want to feel satisfied and loving feelings for your partner, it's an ongoing process of like investing and taking care of. It's like managing a garden. You don't just like plant the seeds and be like, well, you know, hope it works out. Like, you may have some really nice plants in your garden, and if you don't take care of it, eventually the garden will become overrun with weeds and it will no longer be managed. And it's very similar with a relationship. Like, you might start off with like feeling really awesome about the relationship, and if you don't have these processes and practices to nurture the garden will not do that well.
Very true.
And this brings me to the model of relationship that I don't know, that I rely on, I guess, and I'm going to introduce it. We're not going to dive too much into it because of time, and that wasn't the focus, I guess, for me. But this idea of an adventure spiritual partnership. So adventure is really the mindset. So it's coming in with curiosity and openness and like a mindset which I think naturally embody, which is like, life it is an adventure and things are going to happen. And how am I going to respond? And the more I do adventure-based sports, the more I guess I tap into that mindset. But you don't need to do adventure-based sports to tap into an adventure mindset. Like, you could be at home and be like, oh, you know, we have to do home remodeling. We could feel like that is a really awful task and we can dread it. Or if we bring the adventure mindset, how can we make this fun? How could we come together and it be dynamic and we can learn and we can grow? This has been such a key component of resiliency for myself and my partner. especially during COVID, because we are so used to going on adventures. And then, you know, we were in quarantine and lockdown for, I mean, we were safe at home. I don't want to say like, oh, poor us, we were safe at our house. Fortunately, we have a house and all these great things, but we were in quarantine and we weren't going anywhere, which was unusual for us. And we still access these concepts. We're like, okay, life has now presented us with new circumstances. So how are we going to respond and come together? And that's the second part of the spirituality. So when I talk about spirituality with my clients, I'm not talking about a specific religion or faith. That can be a part of your spirituality. What I'm referring to is what brings meaning and purpose to your life, and what brings meaning and purpose to your relationship, and what are the values you each come in with, and your expectations, and how do you have conversations around that. And so it's a mindset of, we are here to evolve and get better and be better as humans. That's what I'm talking about with spirituality, is how do we grow together, and also support our individual growth, and how do we get on the same page around that. And so this is what brings the meaning to the relationship beyond we're married or we're not married and we're committed, or we have a house and we have a kid, which those are nice things. It doesn't ground, when we are grounded in a purpose and a vision for a relationship, those things have more umph. And it also helps us in the challenging times, because we can come back to, okay, what is our purpose? How do we want to show up with all this adversity that's going on in the world? And then the last piece is partnership. And so you may have noticed throughout, I did refer once, I think, to my partner as my husband. Most of the time I refer to him as my partner, and it's intentional because, and this could be a whole can of worms, my understanding around the historical context of marriage, pulling out any religious faith-based, just how it was handled by our government and our state, was not one that was equal.
Right.
Like, husbands at one point owned their wives.
Yeah, it was ownership. Yeah.
Yes. And that, from my point of view, that model, it no longer works with current cultural circumstances and how the culture has shifted. And so I bring in the language of partnership because it, in the language, is one of equality. It is saying we are coming together, we are going to be a team, and we are going to face life's challenges together. We are going to grow together. We're going to go on adventures together. It really brings together, it's like the foundation for how we operate in the world as a relation, as a couple or as romantic partners.
That is very interesting, because I always viewed people using that term as more like making a statement about like gay marriage and stuff, but this is like completely, I mean, it's a whole different take on it actually, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah. Oh, and I've used, I use the word partner, even like with my daughter, it's a partnership. We have goals that that are important in our lives that we work on together. And so that's a partnership. And then of course in business and in romantic relationships, partners.
And in other parts of the world, like I have a really good friend from New Zealand, and that's what people use more often than not. They don't use spouse, they use partner. And that really resonated with me in the sense that like, oh yeah, like this is a partnership. Like the strengths each of us bring are equally valuable. And every part, like we each maybe divvy up the tasks, and that is equally valuable and important for us, to operate as a team. And each person's needs and expectations are important to talk about. It just, I don't know, it feels different to me than some of the baggage that comes with the traditional marriage model.
And in a partnership, even if it's business, you tend to have common goals that you work on together. So Yeah, part of the deal.
Part of the deal. So I also included like the adventure part, why having fun together is so important, because it increases the deposits in your emotional bank account. So what I often talk about with my clients is, even when they're really struggling, if you can have fun together, that's so huge in facing challenges, because you remember, oh yeah, like we can have fun together. Life isn't all drudgery. Like that is so key to this time. It seems counterintuitive because a lot of people are like, but it's so dark and it's so hopeless. And I'll come to my last piece. And you know, I got to honor that. And that is important. You know, I talked about the self-care and honoring your emotions and also being able to talk to your partner. So that's important. And having fun and nurturing what is enjoyable in life is equally important, because it gives us the capacity to have the difficult conversations with our partner and with others in our life.
Yep.
So you're not coming from a place of depletion when you engage in conversations with others. You're coming from a place of, okay, I'm feeling pretty good. You know, I increased my vibe. My life bar is feeling really strong, so that I'm not going to be totally depleted when I have this difficult conversation. Because if you're in the red flashing zone, you're not going to want to have a difficult conversation.
No.
That's not appealing. Like you're going to be like, I don't have the energy. I don't have the time. And by avoiding those conversations, if we go back to, let me go back to that. Yeah, it's going. If we go back to this, you know, if we avoid the difficult conversations, ultimately it takes away from the sense of we and connectedness, because we build connection and trust through the rupture and repair process.
Very true.
So that's
like it.
That's all my content. Questions, comments?
No, I mean, honestly, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. Yeah, it's good stuff. I like it. I always appreciate your workshops, though. I always take away something new. So I like that model. It makes sense to me.
Oh, thanks, Chriseda.
So
is there one thing that stands out? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go, Chriseda.
No, I'm done. That's good.
Oh, I was going to make two comments. One is, a while ago I saw a study, and I forget where I saw it, but it basically said that like happy marriages, it's not that they fight less, they fight just as much, but it was like the amount of time between when they fought and when it actually got resolved. And if it got resolved like the same day, it was so much more likely to be a happy marriage. I thought that was interesting. And the other point that I liked was when you talked about the adventure part and like getting to know people. Part of the problem, I think, where relationships go sour is when you stop having that curiosity and you think that you know somebody. Like you're like, oh, I know exactly how they're going to react, because like you poison your brain. And it's like, you know, you just kind of like, you're like, oh, I'm not going to bother saying anything because I know what they're going to say. And it just kind of,
the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's an really awesome point to consider. Is like how do you, you know, in Buddhism they talk about like the beginner's mindset. Like how do you bring a beginner's mind to everything in how you interact with the world? You'll experience more joy really when you don't go in and be like, oh, I already know what it's going to be like, or I already have experienced sunsets before. Why would I see another sunset? You know, it's like, gosh, you just miss out on the opportunity to see the beauty of life.
Well, you do. Yeah. And I've done a lot of work around domain and what is your domain and what is someone else's domain. And it is not, what is that chart? I love those charts with the overlapping circles.
Venn diagrams.
Venn diagram. I love Venn diagrams. And it is not a Venn diagram. Your domain does not overlap with anybody else's. It can like be close, but you're only responsible and can only know how you personally feel and how your body and your emotions are personally reacting to a situation. You cannot know, not truly know. You can guess, but you can't know what is going on in someone else's domain. So to keep that in mind, I have found terribly helpful. You know, I can guess, I could be like, you know, why is my daughter having a fit about this? You know, why is she so upset? This isn't a big deal. I can't know. Or I can say she's upset about this because whatever situation. I can't know. I can only know what is in my domain.
Well, sometimes too, they tell you and you think that's what it is, but they don't even know, which is really tricky, right? They're like, oh, I'm upset because of this, but that's not really what's causing it because they don't even know, which is a whole other.
Well, that's where self-care comes in. That's where self-care and self-reflection and self-relation comes in.
Yep. And another piece is, you know, we often want people to see that we've changed, right? Like we don't want to get stuck in a box. We're like, you know, I've worked on this. Why can't they see that I worked on this?
Mm-hmm.
The same thing we want for ourselves, other people want as well. Like our partner doesn't want us to just assume that they're going to respond the same way. They want the opportunity to change and show up in a different way, just like we do.
Yeah.
And so, and it's the same with our family members. And so the curiosity, like you were talking about, Samuel, and the openness, that's what's so key. If I can do my best to say, okay, I know I want to be offered the opportunity to show up in a different way. So I'm going to also create the opportunity for my partner to do the same, or my family member or my coworker. So huge. That's like such a gift for you and them and the relationship. Because then you get to release a lot of stuff that maybe no longer serves anyone. And then the other piece is Esther Perel, because we mentioned sexual health. That's kind of her area of expertise. And one of the things she talks about in terms of passion and intimacy and long-term relationships is having elements of surprise and novelty and curiosity and imagination. And that's why the adventure spiritual partnership, from my point of view, is so important, because the adventure right there tells you it's new, it's different, there's an element of novelty and surprise. So it creates that kind of mystery and that kind of keeping you on your toes, and that's attractive. It draws you in, and it draws your partner in. And so when you guys can create opportunities around that, and she also talks about when we see our partner in a different light, and we see them doing something different, or we see their confidence show up. The leaves are moving around. It's fine. It's so key to attraction. And so, and when we're attracted to something, when we're feeling excited about it, we're going to invest more in it. And then we're more willing to do some of the hard work.
True. Very, very true.
So
I like it. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me show up.
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah.
This is great. Okay, I'll stop the recording. Stop the share, I guess. And then we'll stop the record. Okay, pause recording.